Good morning. This is House Talk with Wally Kerr. I'm your host, Dave McKay. Joining me this morning, as every Saturday morning, is Wally Kerr from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty Kerr Team. Wally, good morning.
Good morning, Dave.
I'm ready to have a fantastic show. I had a great time last week, and the thing that's most noticeable is I think my voice has returned back to normal. We're ready to go full speed ahead.
You were fighting it. I don't think the listeners knew last week, but you were fighting it hard, and I thought we had a great show last week. I had several inquiries after our show. We had some callers. I had a couple of people text, so keep those questions coming, and I'm happy to do that after our show is over. Always want to be responsive and help our listeners understand maybe the real estate transaction that they're in now, or maybe one they anticipate being in the near future.
And we'll give out the number several times throughout the show, but just remember, of course, area code 405, but 330-3000. You can lob Wally a text if you like, and just text back or forth, or you could give him a call, 330-3000. I know one of the things we're going to do, if it's back, we're going to do the quiz, because I had so much fun with that. Are we doing that again this week?
Man, you nailed it on true or false last week.
Yes.
in our questions.
I was very proud of myself.
I think we'll do that each session unless we have more material than we can cover.
Sure.
But
okay.
I think the true or false questions are fun, and I hope they are for our listeners, so we'll do that today.
Fantastic.
Couple of other segments. We always visit what the market's doing.
Sure.
And I've got a segment today on if you're a home seller, should you get an appraisal done up front and perhaps a home inspection done up front before you sell your home?
Sure.
Got some good things to talk about there today. Chris Doak, Dave, is going to join us for the first time. He's one of our preferred lenders with Gateway Mortgage. They work really the entire state of Oklahoma. Gateway is in 43 states. So if someone is selling here and moving out of town, they can actually help with the loan here if they're going to move to Virginia or they're going to move to whatever state it is. So they can be a local lender. They can help if you're moving out of state. Going to talk about some good things today. He's got a good down payment assistance program. We're going to talk a little bit, hopefully, about avoiding PMI, how you get away from paying that darned PMI. Okay?
Yes.
And then float down options, which we covered a little bit about last week or the week before. And then the other topic I've got today is selling or buying a home with an assumable loan on it. I think this will be a really good segment today for those people who might be sitting out there and might have a pretty good sized down payment to purchase a home with. I think that assumable loans are being overlooked, perhaps.
Okay.
So today, Dave, you and I know rates are in the sixes. Okay, some lenders are in the low sixes, some are in the mid sixes, some are in the high sixes. Wouldn't it be nice if you could go in and assume somebody's current loan on their home and maybe they've got a 3% rate?
Oh, sure. 100%.
A 3.5% rate, a 4% rate?
Yeah, that would be great.
You know what that helps you do is buy more home at a lower payment.
Sure.
So if you've got some down payment money, we'll talk about that in one of our segments today.
Okay, and then you had something you wanted to mention. We talked about last week. You had mentioned that your mother put her home in her name and your sister's names, and you wanted to add a little something to that could go into taxes and stuff like that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we don't lead our listeners wrong. So I made a comment about an easy way to keep like a parent's home from going into probate. Let's say you're one of the children. So if you go put your name on along with your mom, she does what's called a quitclaim deed. Now that could cause a little bit of a tax consequence in the future. It's this thing called a stepped-up basis. I'm not going to explain it on the air because I think it would be confusing. I would recommend before ever conveying the family property from, say, my mom was 90 is what we talked about. She decided to convey over to my two sisters and put her house in not only her name, but the two sisters' names.
Yes.
It can have a tax consequence to that, Dave. And so if you're a listener, go read about stepped-up basis. But I would just say check with your accountant or your tax advisor first before doing that.
Okay. All right. Let's get to our market update. What are we doing with numbers of homes? Are they flying off the shelves? And what's going on?
You know, it depends on the price range. It's a good question. There's been very little change in the market over the last week. Interest rates are holding pretty stable. The economic news is not all over the place. We're not hearing about the Fed raising rates every 2 or 3 days. We did have a really, really strong week for sales in the Oklahoma City MLS. Last week was the strongest week over the last 8 weeks, but I pulled some numbers that I thought our listeners might be interested in.
Okay.
So let's look at the number of homes placed under contract in the realtor's MLS system. And so over the last 8 weeks I studied, there's been about 521 homes per week placed under contract. That's over the last 8 weeks. Dave, I looked at the same period last year during that same 8-week period. It was about 11% higher. There were about 587 homes. That doesn't seem like a lot, and it's not. There's a few less homes selling on average this year than last year. But doesn't that make sense? Because rates are up a little bit, right?
Yes. And have we had over the last about 6 or 7 weeks, I remember, and this may be a different number, so it may be apples and oranges. I remember we were talking about selling homes where we sold, there was 150 homes sold. Then it was like 250, then 300. Didn't we get up to 400 or maybe 600 homes sold in a week? And it was really climbing, and a lot of factors because it's that time of the year.
Right.
So is that a number that's correlated with this number, or is it a little different?
So this last week, there were about 640, 650 homes put under contract in the MLS. You know what you're thinking back to is that first, second, third week in January, where there was only like 125.
Yes.
So it's really, really up. You and I know it is selling season. I also studied, just kind of interesting, the MLS, Dave, can be used really across the state of Oklahoma. So if I studied the whole state, it looked like the number of sales were down by about 11%. If you pulled that in within a 40-mile radius of downtown Oklahoma City, actually the numbers were down by numbers about 9.3% from last year during that 8-week period. So, again, I attribute probably a lot of that to interest rates. The thing remains is that people still aren't selling like they did last year or the year before because a lot of people have got what we've talked about every week. They've got a 2.5%, a 2.75% interest rate on their home right now, a 3, a 3.5%, a 4%. It's not quite as exciting to get out and buy when rates are 6.5%.
Absolutely.
I think the people that are still selling are the ones that are relocating. Some people have different family needs. They need a bigger home for a growing family. They need a smaller home because they're maturing in age and the kids aren't at home anymore and they're empty nesters. There are people selling for financial reasons. Unfortunately, there's sales due to separation or divorce. That's just a part of life. And then sometimes it's from a loss of a family member. So it just leaves fewer homes available for more buyers. Demand exceeds supply right now for most price points. Now, Dave, in the marketplace, I've got a really beautiful home I'm getting ready to put on the market in Esperanza. That's a gated community off of May Avenue there between 150th and 164th.
Yes.
They've got quite a bit of competition at about the $700,000 price point. So it's still red hot, under $250,000, $300,000. For the right home, say it was in Edmond in a gated community. If it was an oak tree home and it was $450,000, $500,000, $550,000, that's going to jump off the market. Really depends on where it's located, but we're in selling season. The two markets that surprised me the most, and then we can move on, is Newcastle and Moore are dangerously low on existing home inventory. It is so low. We talked a couple of weeks ago about in Moore, Oklahoma, if you didn't look at new homes, between $190,000 and $2 million, there were only 32 homes for sale. There's now only 23. I think it's the proximity to Oklahoma City and Northwest Oklahoma City, maybe the school districts that people want to be in, the proximity to Oklahoma City and the drive time. So really, really low on existing inventory there. The Fed doesn't really know what their next action is going to be. They're talking about that. So we'll update that again when we get together next week.
So sellers clearly are going to do well in the current market with the number of homes available, and assuming that their home is ready to sell, it's prepared, it's marketed well. Do home sellers have the time to get their home prepared to market well, or do they need to be a little quicker into the game getting ready to sell right now? And where does appraisals and inspections roll into that as marketing the home? So the question basically is with appraisals and inspections, what role does that have in marketing, and is there time to start marketing their home?
Okay, so good question. So marketing is a lot more than just sticking a couple of pictures on the MLS or on Zillow, right? And so for a lot of people, timing is very specific. For instance, if you put your home on the market today, Dave, you're probably like, I'm doing it right now for a reason. I'm either building a home and my builder said it's going to be done. I'm relocating to Topeka, and I've got to start my job on this date.
Yes.
I'm military, and I'm being PCS'd to San Angelo, Texas, or to Fort Hood.
Sure.
And I know when I've got to be there. So for a lot of sellers, marketing is something that a lot of sellers sometimes can do in a limited basis, but there's so much more to it than that. It's the right pictures. It's preparing your home to compete against the other homes, maybe setting deadlines for offers so that the price is driven up. If you're selling your home, you want top dollar, right?
100%.
In fact, if you're selling your home, you want more than top dollar.
110%.
Right? That's right. And that's still possible to do in this marketplace, like what we talked about. It depends on your price point, how much competition you've got. That's got to be weighed out. You got to look carefully at what the competing homes look like. I can create more demand for a home than you can or any other seller can do on their own, because what we are is we're in the marketing business. So let's talk about how this preparation would be more than just cleaning your shelves or fixing the fence or making a couple of updates or just getting some good pictures. Let's talk about upfront appraisal. What are the pros and what are the cons to doing an appraisal up front? If you have a lot of home sales in your neighborhood that are similar to your home, you probably don't need to pay for an appraisal.
Okay.
A good real estate broker like me can help determine exactly what that value is by looking at comparable sales. You might want an appraisal if you have something that's a little bit more unique. So let's say it's 5,500 square feet loaded with custom amenities on the inside. You've got a fantastic pool, or you've got a shop building, or maybe you've got a very contemporary home where there are not a lot of comparable sales.
Sure.
An appraisal is going to cost about $450, $500. In that case, I'll have realtors call or buyers that call and say, I'm really interested in that home, but I'm not sure I'm really bought in on the price. What did you use for comparable sales? And if there really aren't any, the best thing for me to do is say, hey, tell you what, the owner paid for an appraisal up front so that we'd be able to answer that question. And the appraiser found the best comparables, and this is the value, and it's been appraised by a certified real estate appraiser. So it gives me and the homeowner, when we really can't identify what the comps are going to be, something to go on.
So that's given us the value. Now with a couple of things that we may not know that needs to be fixed, and we've talked about this before, where you've had deals practically fall through because the seller didn't know that something needed to be fixed, and it was a costly item. It could have been a roof that they didn't have looked at 2 years after that hailstorm or something like that. So I could see where this is going to be a benefit. But what about a home inspection as part of the marketing process and as part of getting ready to sell your home?
Well, this is really important. So again, if you're on a time frame and a buyer hires a home inspector and the home inspector finds something that, in a lot of cases, Dave, the homeowner doesn't know it's there. They don't know they have an issue. They don't know they have a problem. It might be structural. It could be framing in the attic. It could be an air conditioning, a heating and air conditioning problem. So if the buyer walks away, now you're back to square one. So I think it's really, really smart to get a pre-inspection done. And the older your home is, the more you ought to get it done.
Sure.
Older homes just have a few more issues.
Yes.
It could be the sewer line. It could be the electrical panel or electrical service. It could be plumbing issues. Okay. Maybe the insulation needs to be all redone upstairs, or there's electrical problems. So I think that, it's still possible that a buyer's still going to get their own inspection. So let's say you're selling your home today, and you say, Wally, my home was built in 1950 or 1970, or maybe it was 1985 or 1990.
Okay.
Wally, do you think I ought to get a home inspection, a pre-inspection? And my question is back to you. How important is it to you that if your home sells and it's under contract, that it doesn't fall through?
Pretty important.
You're likely to say, yeah.
Yes.
Hey, I don't want this deal to fall through. What do you mean fall through?
Yes.
Don't let it fall through, Wally. I thought that's why I hired you as the professional.
Yes. But no, you're absolutely
got an
right.
emphatic response on that one. So, and my response is, Dave, I can't crawl through your attic and identify problems because I'm not an expert on this. I'm not going to be able to crawl up on your roof and tell you whether there's issues there or not. So let's go spend $300 or $400, get a pre-inspection done, and at least let's find the big stuff up front.
It's a nominal fee because I want to plan ahead where, and again, I don't know how too far out, but if it's just a month or two, I would rather know 2 months before that I do have to replace my roof. And because there's fees for your mortgage insurance and your down payment. And there's a lot of money that needs to be allotted for when you're moving and you're selling and obviously buying a home. So if I can mitigate that by taking care of a couple issues before I get down the road and too far down the road where something could fall through, really, what is the cost of a couple $100? That's almost insurance that's going to help me down the road.
You know what else you save too, along with the things you just mentioned, is stress. So let's say you and I you hire a home inspector to come out up front, identify issues. Now you know what you've got. You've got time to fix it, look at the expenses, and find the most reasonable contractor instead of being rushed. Now flip it around. We sell your home, and I say, hey, Dave, next Wednesday they're going to come out and do a 2 or 3 hour inspection on your home. That's kind of stressful while you're sitting at work.
Yes.
Wondering what they might find that could be a deal killer.
Yes.
I would just say this is going to help identify potential deal killers. You may pay for a home inspection. The buyer is probably still going to order their own from maybe someone that they're realtor or somebody that has been recommended to them by a friend. Go get your inspector. Chances are that home inspector that you're referred to might find 1 or 2 or 3 other small things, maybe 5 other small things, but at least you've identified the big ones up front.
Do you have somebody that you recommend that Wally Kerr works with that we could trust?
Yeah, we've had Oklahoma Home Inspection Service on our show a couple of times. They're going to join us again in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
405-366-8889.
Okay.
And they can do a pre-inspection on a property. This is going to help you obtain estimates up front for anything that might be big. It's going to help you identify possible deal killer inspection traps in advance. And here's what I think is most important, Dave. Let's say you're going to sell your home and move to another one. And you say, okay, my house is worth $320 and I owe $220. So I got $100,000 equity.
Yes.
I'm going to pull out any real estate fees and closing costs. And you're probably trying to budget for how much you're going to put down on the next home and what your payment's going to be. The only thing that can really hop in there that was unforeseen
repairs
are these repairs.
Yes.
Whether it's the roof or it's the HVAC or it's structural. So I'm a big advocate for getting a home inspection. And let's run back and close that question out about appraisals. Remember, you could pay for an appraisal up front, but when it sells, the mortgage lender actually picks the appraiser.
Sure.
You and I don't get to intervene in that process. That's a neutral third party. Even if you and I pay for an appraisal and it comes back at $580 on a home, there's a chance that that another appraiser could come in afterward and appraise it for $590 or $570 or $600. Remember that if an appraiser goes in and does one up front, it's not because it's selling. They're just going to go in and look at data and say, these are the comparable sales. This is what this sold for over here. So based on your built square footage and location, I think it's worth this.
One last question we'll get out of this. Is it too early, 6 months, 9 months out, for my own well-being to go ahead and pay for an appraisal just so I have a kind of ballpark figure of what my home is worth?
Good question, and I would say no. Let's do that appraisal closer to when you're going to sell your home because appraisers are always looking for the most current sales data.
So that could change.
It could change. I do it 30, 45 days before.
This is House Talk with Wally Kerr. I'm your host, Dave McKay. And Wally, one of the favorite segments is whenever we can have a guest. So today we have Chris Doak from Gateway Mortgage. Good morning. Welcome.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Wally, for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on. You know, Dave, we joined forces with Gateway some time back as what we call a preferred lender just because I like the way he runs his team. It's so similar to the way I run mine. Right, Chris?
Totally agree. I think client experience is a huge piece for you. It is for me, and we want it the best for our folks.
We do. You've got a big team with everybody having their own specific role, like we do at our real estate company. We have listings manager, closing manager, we have customer service, we have inside sales agents who are making calls all day long. We have agents on the team. And you do the same. You've got 8 or 9 people in your office, and everybody knows exactly what their role is. And you've got some great programs, too. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today,
so
Dave.
I wanted to ask, I'm sure Gateway Mortgage has several different programs that can help home buyers, especially in the current market, in helping them win the home they want. That's a phrase that Wally and I always want to, how do you win? And we want to win that home. With inventories of available homes so low, obviously being a pretty competitive market right now, what are some of the programs that you have that can help people get into their homes right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. We've seen renters want to stop renting because rent has increased, and they can see that they can buy a home and a lot of times have lower mortgages. And a lot of times they don't have the assets built up to be able to, purchase the home. We've got some down payment assistance options for folks. One in particular that we've been using a lot lately, where they get 5% assistance on their purchase, and that takes care of their down payment, plus it helps with closing costs. So that they can get in with some help of some seller concessions for almost nothing potentially.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Chris, is a seller concession to you and me is maybe we can get the seller to pay a couple thousand in closing costs, $2,000 or $3,000.
Sure.
Sometimes the seller will do that. Sometimes we have to go bump the sales price up just a little bit to cover that.
That's right.
Let's say it's a $200,000 home, and the seller's kind of stuck on that price because they just put it on the market.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can bump it to $203,000.
Yep.
And then with your 5% down program, buyers in a lot of cases can walk in really with no money down whatsoever. Is that right?
Absolutely, and we've had that happen. We just had one go under contract where they're going to get their earnest money back at closing. So all
great.
was a portion of their earnest money.
Okay, so Wally introduced me to this monster called mortgage insurance, and I learned that the fine line right there is 20%.
That's right.
If they don't have 20%, what can they do to manage that to where they don't have mortgage insurance or having to pay the PMI and all that stuff?
That's a great question. And it used to be, Dave, years ago, mortgage insurance was really, it was a bad term, mainly because it was really expensive. So the goal was you always wanted to put 20% down so you didn't have this extra fee each month. Okay?
Right.
And the mortgage insurance payment just protects the lender from default. That's all it does. And the borrower pays it. So what it used to be incredibly expensive, it's now actually, Wally and I were just talking about how incredibly inexpensive it is when credit scores are in a good position. And so a lot of folks, you still can put 20% down and eliminate it, okay? But a lot of folks that are pretty savvy financially, I'm seeing them do 10% down, hold their 10% back, go invest that, make 6-7%, and pay a very incremental mortgage insurance fee monthly.
Yeah, that's amazing because you're right. It used to just be an ugly term, and people would say, now I need to put 20% down to avoid the PMI, right? And they can still do that. But what you're saying is just PMI's gotten. Now, why is the PMI become more affordable?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that really surprises me because you and I know after the bust in 2006, 7, and 8,
That's right.
they just tried to redo the mortgage industry where everything was safer.
Yeah,
but you're saying mortgage insurance is more affordable
It is
today.
more affordable. And this is on, just to be clarified, this is on a conventional loan. Okay, so FHA loans, it's a standard mortgage insurance, and it's not private, and you always have it for the life of the loan. But on a conventional loan, we shop it with different mortgage insurance companies. I honestly don't know 100% the answer to that, other than there's a lot of competitors in the market, and I think that's driven it down some to make it more affordable for borrowers, no doubt.
That's awesome. And you've also got some 97% conventional loans with just 3% down. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And, and even the ability for lower mortgage insurance on those, if they make under a certain, Fannie Mae's provided, and Freddie Mac have provided great conventional products that allow for 3% down and lower interest rate and mortgage insurance rate. They have to make under a certain income limit.
Wow.
Well, something else I learned a couple of weeks ago, and just by osmosis being around Wally, is this term float down option, which I think is pretty cool. You know, I think it's probably interesting if rates keep going up. I don't know if you're going to use it, but then, of course, if you're about 6 months away, it gives you that, is it correct? It's a one-time option? And tell me a little bit more about the float down option, what you guys can do.
It's a great question, and this is in conjunction with a new construction, a build. We have a great long-term or extended rate lock option, and it allows you to lock in the current rate. So, for instance, in the last few weeks, rates have been trending down a little bit, with a couple hiccups here or there, but they've been trending down. And so people want to take advantage of that, even though they may not be closing for 90 days, 180 days, et cetera. We can do it all the way up to a year. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And we lock in an adjusted higher rate to make sure that it caps them at a certain rate. And then one time within 60 days of closing, we allow for them to float that down if rates are lower.
That's a great option for people building. I think long-term, that you and I agree.
Yeah.
Of course, I read, and so I'm
Right.
kind of quoting what I read.
Right.
But
Same.
long term, you and I believe that rates will trend down more than they will
Yeah.
trend up long term, right?
Yeah, I think so. Since January 1, really, if you look at it, they really have trended down with a few hiccups. And I think Fannie Mae has even said they thought it would be in the mid to low fives by mid to end of
Okay.
the year.
I think the big
Yeah.
one there, gentlemen, is there's fewer existing homes for sale.
Yeah,
So a lot of people are turning to building,
that's right.
but those builders are still
Yeah.
taking 6 to 8 to 9 months to build.
Right.
So isn't that float down option really a really good product and something
great.
that people should look at
Yeah.
who are building, planning to build, custom building, or
Yep.
maybe their closing date is months out?
I love it. I've had a few in the last couple weeks where they were about 75 days out, and we locked them at 90 days. And I said, guys, I think by the time you close that they're going to be down further. So let's lock you in. It's not that much different from market rate. And then you have that float down. It's just insurance for you.
So I know that rates can move several times a day. I mean,
Yes.
it's that volatile sometimes.
Yes, that's super fun.
And
Is that what you call that?
Oh my gosh, it's painful.
So Wally once took a vacation day in the late 90s. Okay, so he's available 24/7
That's
just
right.
about.
That's right.
So if someone is on a Sunday afternoon and Wally's showing a home and they check it out and they basically want to get something locked in, when are you available and what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah.
And people want your info.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Great question. We are obviously Monday through Friday. We're open all the time. 405-253-2276 is the number that people can call or text. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, 12 to 4, if you're out, you find the dream home and you need to get pre-qualified, we're ready to go.
Fantastic. Chris Doak from Gateway Mortgage, 405-253-2276.
That's right.
And I will tell you, Dave, some of the best rates in the industry. It's one of the reasons they're our preferred lender.
Yeah.
Great rates, really, really great service,
Yeah.
and easy to communicate with. We highly endorse them, and that's one of the reasons Chris is on the show with us today.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming, buddy.
Thank you.
Again, that was Chris Doak at Gateway Mortgage. Their number 405-253-2276. Now, Wally, on to my favorite segment. It's the real estate quiz.
So I'm going to ask you some questions today. You'll answer true or false. I'll give a brief explanation. We'll try to move along a little bit faster
Okay.
this week than we did last week. By the way, if you want to know the true value of your home today without having to talk to me, you can text me your address to 330-3000. Work up a value for your home. Give me an estimate on the condition of the property on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being best. Hey, do me a favor. Tell me if you've got a swimming pool. Tell me if you recently remodeled. If you think it's just average condition, rated a 6 or a 7. I'll text you back with the approximate value of your home so that you'll have that information and be able to make an informed decision. Whether you're curious or whether you're selling, either way, shoot me a text and I'll go to work
Fantastic.
on it. okay?
330-3000.
So let's have some fun today, Dave. So here's one that I think a lot of people know, but I know some people don't. Dave, if a tenant lives in a home that's being sold by the owner of that home, does the tenant have to move out by the closing date? True or false?
False. They do not.
Right. The tenant's lease is protected by law. So the lease runs with the property.
Yes.
So if you've got a tenant inside a property now and you want to sell that home, you and I know if you're a homeowner and it's leased, the lease takes precedence. So if you're a tenant and you're living to the show and you're hoping you'll get into home ownership one day, don't worry if the home is sold. If you have a signed lease and you're not month to month, that lease sticks.
Fantastic.
Right? How about this? If I leave town this summer for 2 or 3 weeks, it's okay to adjust my thermostat above 80 degrees while I'm gone during the summer.
Yeah, I guess it would be legal to do that, but I would say that you would not want to do that.
And would you know why?
Because I think that, one, when you get back, that's going to be a huge strain on your system trying to get it back down to something comfortable.
Yeah, but wouldn't you save a lot of money if your thermostat was set up a lot higher for 3
I'm going to
weeks?
spend a lot of money when it's running for 3 weeks, when the temperatures are 100 degrees outside this summer, trying to get it back down to the 70s.
You know why you don't do this?
Why?
So it's just like on a car. You know when you drive your car and you've got your air on and you look underneath the car and there's water leaking out?
Yes.
Okay, so your air conditioning is dehumidifying the air. So if you set your thermostat above 80 degrees, the system doesn't run long enough to take the humidity out of the air. Over time, you could actually have some mold begin to grow.
Ooh.
or mildew. I've been in homes before that were vacant and the air conditioning was turned way up. And inside the toilets, around the water, you'll see just a little film of green either in the toilet bowl or on the closed toilet seat. And that's because the system's not running long enough to dehumidify the air. So don't turn your thermostat if you're traveling, especially during the summer. It's not as bad in the winter. That's not a problem because you're not running your air. But keep your thermostat below 80 degrees. Maybe set it 77, 78, 79. All right, how about this one? If my neighbor fences in a part of my property and continuously uses it for 15 years, my neighbor might own that land. True or false?
I'm going to say that this is all determined by a length of time. And you said 15 years.
Right.
So I'm going to say in a weird way that, yes, they own the property that they fenced in.
Yeah, that's true. It's called adverse possession, or what some people laugh at. The term is called squatter's rights.
Yes,
so
I've heard this.
I fenced your land. This happens more in the country where people really don't watch those fence boundaries. Maybe they'll rebuild a fence. Maybe it blows over in a storm. Maybe there was no fence. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody puts up a fence and uses that property openly, actively, and you don't say anything about it, they can go get title to that property in certain instances. So fences, I think this would be a surprise to a lot of people. Dave, you live in a neighborhood in town. Do you think the fence is sitting in your backyard exactly where it's supposed to be, right on the property line?
Probably not.
Probably not. It might be 2 inches off. It could be 4 inches off. It could be 8 inches off.
Sure.
Guess what? If you live in your home and your neighbor lives in their home for 15 years and they fenced part of your property, that property is going to belong to them. Easiest way to look at it is you kind of own where the fence is.
Yes.
Okay? But that's what's called squatter's rights. So you got that one right. How about this one? Is earnest money the same thing as your down payment in a real estate transaction?
I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to say no.
Good. It's false. Earnest money is
false,
good faith
yes.
money. So you might put up on a $300,000 home, you might put up $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 of earnest money.
Okay.
Good faith money that says if I walk away from the deal and I default on the contract, I just decide I don't want this home anymore, you may lose your earnest money to the seller.
Okay.
Okay. But the down payment might be, as we were talking with Chris, 3%, 5%, 10%. So earnest money and down payments are different.
So with really competitive markets, if I really want that house, if I want to win that house, could I offer to the seller higher earnest money, showing that I really want that house?
That is an awesome strategy because what you're saying is, wow, look at me. Look how much good faith money I'm putting up. I don't want to lose this deal. I don't want to back out. I want your home. So sure, more earnest money really speaks volumes about how serious a buyer you are.
And that goes into, the earnest money goes into the payment on the home, correct?
Yeah.
It rolls into that.
Yeah, so great question. That's typically held by either the real estate agency, if there is one, that's listing the home for sale. It could be held by the selling agency, like if you're working with a realtor like me, or just held at the title company. And that money is credited back to you at closing for your down payment and or your closing costs.
Okay.
Okay, good question. How about if I've upgraded or replaced my roof or my heat and air system or systems, I should get every dollar back for that. True or false?
False.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Isn't it just like putting in a pool? Sure, it could raise a little bit and it makes it attractive. And you're going to find the family that really wants that home because they have kids and they want the pool. But that doesn't mean at all if you spend an extra $45,000, you can lump that onto the price of the home.
Right. You know, buyers expect the roof not to leak. They expect the heat and air to be good.
Yes.
So if you go, it is going to have some effect, but it's not a dollar for dollar return. And that's unfortunate, but it will be something that will make the home very attractive to a buyer and should fetch a premium price over and above if it's marketed that way.
Okay.
And that's really important to market a home that way with updates and what you've spent so that you can defend a higher price.
So appraisers, when they look at it and they see a heat and air system that's 10 years or one that's 1 year old, that does have some value to them, and they kind of adjust accordingly because they know that this is a newer system and it's more valuable.
Right.
Great.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here's a big one. Solar panels will add value to my home when I sell it. True or false?
My first reaction would say true, but it's how is the buyer going to use those solar panels? Are they even, do they even want solar power? I'm just going to go with my gut and say, sure, it's an additional thing added to the home. It's true, but I have a feeling you got me on this one.
Well, it's a trick question.
Okay.
Because it could go either way.
Okay.
If you're green and you operate green and you've got a car that is partial electric and you go recycle, you're probably really into our environment and really interested in saving energy.
Yes.
You might even be able to sell some of that energy back to the power company. Here's the true answer. An appraiser can only add value for those if they can find 3 other sales inside your neighborhood that are comparable in your built-in square footage and find 3 other homes, get this, that have sold in the last 6 to 12 months that also had solar panels. Otherwise, the appraiser is not going to be able to add any value for it, and you're going to need a buyer with a bunch of cash. So they're a big investment. I think that's the reason I wanted to add this question today. I've seen people spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on solar panels and then try to sell their home a year or 2 or 3 years later and ask me, how much will the solar panels add? If you got a buyer with a big down payment and they really want them, and they've always wanted solar panels or have been thinking about it, that may be your buyer, but it may be a very small percentage of buyers. So I would say be careful about making the investment into solar unless you're really positive you're going to stay in that home for a while.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a long-term investment.
To recognize the savings. Right.
Sure.
Right.
Okay. Wow.
Let's do 2 more today. Dave, should you list your home a little higher than market value to leave a little bit of room to negotiate with a buyer?
This is something I would do if I was marketing by myself because I'm thinking I have something to come back off. But Wally is probably going to tell me something different.
I'm most interested in more buyers for your home.
Yes.
The more buyers there are for your home, let's say I took a home today that was worth $100,000 and I put it on the market for $90,000.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, the Zestimate at Zillow might show it's worth $98,000 or $102,000. And so I've got this $100,000 home I put up for $90,000. What do buyers do when they see that online? Wow, what a great buy.
Sure.
I could buy this home and have instant equity.
Yes.
Well, what happened if I took that same $100,000 home, let's say I priced it at $95,000? Still looks like a pretty good buy if it's worth $100,000, $102,000.
Yes.
So what if I went in instead and priced that home that's really worth $100,000, $102,000 for $107,000 or $108,000?
You might not even get any nibbles because they already see that it's overpriced.
Right. Get some nibbles, but not as many. So do you want more buyers for your home and more competition and more demand, or do you want less? I recommend price competitively, and in the market where there's so little for sale, you'll get offers above full price. And you'll be able to tell
You're
exactly
right, because
what
they're
it's
going
worth.
to come in, if it's 95, they're coming in at 97, 98, close to that. And they might say 98, and I'll pay your closing cost or whatever. And now all of a sudden you're at a $100,000 value, and that's what it's valued at. So yes, okay.
They will fight for your home.
Sure.
They'll fight for your home. Okay. Here's the last one I'll ask today. So you should start, true or false, decluttering your closets to make them look more roomy and your garage to make it look bigger before decluttering your main living area or areas inside your home. True or false?
I have to get them all done, but do I need to declutter those? Well, I'll say that you probably want to do those first, because when you start decluttering stuff in your living room, where's that going to go? That's going to go to the... it's a trick question.
Okay.
You got me.
Right.
I probably want to do the main room
You
first.
have only 12 minutes to say
here we
true
go.
or
Here we
false,
go.
Dave.
I'm going to say that's false. You want to do the living room first, because I know everybody always takes that stuff, puts it in the garage, and puts it in the closet. So when that's clean, then you clean out the closets in the garage, and everything's all done good. Is that correct?
It all comes down to 2 words.
Okay.
First impressions. When somebody walks in that front door and looks at your living room, that is a lot of times where it makes or breaks the deal.
Yes.
It makes or breaks their level of interest. If they walk in and say, wow, this must be the one. Somebody said it would happen that way. I'd walk in a home and fall in love with it immediately.
Yes.
I love the way this looks. I would declutter the interior, especially your main living area or living areas. The first places that people walk into a home, they need to love what they see. Save the closets. I would definitely declutter those, and that would be second or third down the list. You don't want your closets to look like you're out of room and your garage to be packed and it to look small, but start on the inside.
Okay, so last week it was you threw me a couple of softballs. This week you came with
I came
there
with
was
my
some
A game this week.
curveballs and some sinkers and maybe a spitball or two in there. You got me on some. Those were good questions.
We'll do some more questions next week in our true or false segment of House Talk each week.
Great. Okay, this intrigues me. You mentioned this at the top of the show. I guess the days of buying a home below 4% might be gone. Obviously, a lot of stuff was artificially manipulated because of COVID, the pandemic, and all that stuff.
Right. The Fed just set rates so low, didn't they?
Yes.
Dropped their rate to 0%, left it there too long, but a lot of homeowners took advantage of that, and it's wonderful that they did.
So apparently, I think what you're going to describe here is I could find a home that someone wants to sell, but I could somehow assume their interest rate on it. Is that correct? And then I buy the house from them, and basically I'm paying them maybe a certain fee over here, and then I'm taking over payments of the house, or how's that done?
So in the late 1980s and 1990s, we did a lot of this where people had loans with low interest rates, and then rates went up, and so people would let someone else assume their loan. Here's how it works, Dave. Every home with an FHA or a VA loan on it has an assumable loan. In other words, it's a financing arrangement where I can take your outstanding mortgage and qualify with your mortgage company and assume your loan. Let's say you have a loan on your home of 4%.
Okay.
And I've got some money in the bank. Okay, so let's say I have a pretty large down payment, and you look and say, hey, Wally, I want to sell my home for $250,000, and I owe $225,000, and I've got a 4% loan on my mortgage, and it's an FHA. And I look and say, ooh, FHA, that's an assumable loan. Let's see, you want $250,000, and you owe $225,000, so you have $25,000 in equity. Hey, Dave, how about if I take the $25,000 I've got in my bank, I've got good enough credit, get an assumption package from your lender, and order that for me, and I'll fill it out, and I'd like to assume your current loan, take over your 4% rate. Hey, Dave, how many years do you have left on your 30-year mortgage? And you might tell me you've got 26, 27 years left on your mortgage.
Sure.
I don't have to start at 30 years.
I like that.
Now I'm paying you the equity, so I'm going to pay you the difference between what you owe and what it's worth, and that's the equity. I'm going to purchase your equity. Matter of fact, I'm going to go in and purchase your escrow account, all the money you have in there for taxes and insurance.
Okay.
And I'm going to assume your loan. And here's the big one, Dave. I'm going to give you a release of liability. You're probably going to go do something else. You're going to go buy another home. You're going to move out of state. You don't want me to stop making payments on that mortgage and you to still have contingent liability.
Sure.
So I'm going to give you a release of liability. I'm going to assume your loan, and now I've got a 4% rate instead of a 6.25%. Guess what? Now I'm making a lower monthly payment. I can afford more house by assuming your current loan.
I like that. That's really interesting. And I got what I wanted out of it, selling it. And that's fantastic. You were going to put money into a home anyway as a down payment. And now you got the home you wanted. And instead of for 30 years, now you're looking at 26 years.
My son and my daughter-in-law have been saving for years to buy their first home. They wanted to wait until there was more inventory available. They've saved 20%. Now I'm helping them to try to find a home because they have 20% down and go purchase somebody else's loan on their property. It's not just purchasing the loan. Let's keep that simple. They want to purchase their house, but they can assume an FHA loan. Mm-hmm. They can assume a VA loan. Now, VAs are a tad different, Dave. The difference on a VA loan is veterans can buy with no down payment. They have no PMI, and it's always an assumable loan. Let's turn this around for a minute. You're a veteran. You served our country. Thanks for your service, and you took a VA loan out.
Okay.
I can assume your VA loan. Now, if I'm not a veteran, you can let me assume your loan and do this same thing we just talked about. You call your mortgage company. Hey, I've got this great 4% loan. I need an assumption package. I found a buyer for my property. He wants to purchase my equity and assume my loan. If I'm not a veteran, you're going to lose that amount of your eligibility that the VA gives you to go buy a house with no down payment.
Oh, okay.
Matter of fact, it's going to munch up your equity. Let's say you borrowed $280. And let's say you had $400,000 of entitlement. So you could buy up to a $400,000 home and use your VA.
Yes.
If I'm not a veteran and I don't substitute my own eligibility for yours, you lose that ability to use that $280,000 of eligibility until I pay off your loan. Or until I refinance that loan and take it away from the original mortgage and refinance it to a new loan. And why would I do that if you have a 4% rate?
Sure.
Because it's doubtful that probably in the next 15 or 20 years, I would guess, I just can't imagine, Dave, we'll see rates that low again, because you and I know it was artificially low to fight COVID and to stimulate the economy by the Fed, right?
So this seems like, one, you can get more house for the money by doing this. So you really have to kind of do your homework and find this out so you can get kind of a little bit better value. What is the situation on the down payment I need to come up with now?
Well, and see, that's the big one here is we don't know that until we find someone who's selling their home. Here's what I'd recommend. Keep it super simple. If you're home shopping today and you look at a home that's on the market, the first thing I would do is ask your real estate broker to find out if the loan is assumable. Assumptions are so foreign to a lot of people right now. I did a lot of these 25 years ago, but we just haven't seen assumables for a long time because the rates have been so low. Now that rates are higher, let's increase your purchasing power. If you have a sizable down payment, let's say between $15,000, $20,000 probably minimum, and maybe $100,000 down, depending on the price range you're at, check and see if it has an FHA or VA loan on that home right now that you might be able to assume. Find out what the payment is, the interest rate, and the remaining years. If you've got a good sized down payment, you may be able to go in and assume someone else's mortgage, take over payments. You may be able to afford a lot more house with a house that's got a 4% loan and a payment that's $1,500, as opposed to going in and qualifying at a 6.5% mortgage with a payment that's $2,100. So that's called an assumption. They're not easy. And I think that if you are a seller, you want to be very careful that someone who has expert knowledge of how to do this and how to pull this off, and if your loan qualifies, and if there's any special circumstances, you probably need someone like me. So if you've got questions about it and you're thinking about selling, if you've got questions about it and you're a buyer and you think, wow, it sounds like a great idea, what I'd rather do is have a more expensive home with a lower payment, you need to be asking on any home that you're interested in if it might have an assumable loan on it.
So I go get a home appraisal a month before I get ready to sell it, and it appraises for $300,000. I have a little bit of equity in it, but my interest rate is 3%. So I could put that out there for people to offer a little bit more, knowing that they're getting that real low interest rate. Is that something I could do? Is that something that is in my arsenal now as a seller to get people maybe to kind of pony up a little bit more, knowing on the back end they're saving a lot?
100%. When I was marketing your home, I would say low interest rate, assumable loan with low equity. So I'm saying you don't have to come in with a big down payment. I've got a low interest rate loan. It's assumable. And then here's the other kicker.
Okay.
Do you know that when someone assumes, typically the cost for you as a buyer to assume that seller's loan is 0.5% of the loan balance? Make it easy. You're saying $300,000.
Yes.
1% would be $3,000, right?
Yes.
The assumption fee is $1,500.
Okay.
You're assuming that loan. Man, there's almost no other closing costs. The title insurance goes with it. You don't have to have it appraised again. The closing costs are really, really low on an assumable loan compared to going in and taking a new mortgage today because the loan's already in place. So it's much lower on closing costs. That will account for part of that equity that you're putting down. Let's say you owe $270 and the home is $300,000. That's $30,000 equity. Normally on a $300,000 home, Dave, the closing cost might be $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. If you assume it, the closing costs aren't a whole lot above that assumption fee of $1,500 in this case.
And then again, if the home is valued at $300,000 and I got it at 3%, but I'm been in the home for 10 years and maybe I bought it at $200,000 or something like that. So my pool of people is going to be a little smaller because those people now have to bring me $100,000.
A whole bunch of money, right?
Okay, but there might be people like that this is a great advantage to them because they do have the equity from their other home. Maybe they're downsizing, they're doing whatever, or maybe they want to pull together a little extra money because for $100,000, they're still paying for kind of the value of it, but they're getting more value on the back end because, again, they only have 20 years to go.
I think
and it
you
was
brought
at 3%.
Yeah. You know, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's such an important point. Let's say you own a home now and you're selling it, and man, your home value has gone up a lot. You sell your home and you end up with $70,000 or $80,000 in pocket. Boy, you can be looking for those loans with really low interest rates, where maybe a lot of buyers can't afford to assume that. You walk in with that big down payment. The seller loves that. You're a good qualified buyer. You may be able to go assume something that another buyer couldn't. So you might be the perfect buyer for that. You're right. When you pay on a 30-year mortgage for 10 years, the balance has gone down quite a bit. Yes. So you would need somebody with a lot of equity who could go in and purchase your equity. But there's a lot of buyers running around with those big down payments today because the market has gone up so much. They sell their home and they're putting a lot of money in pocket.
So if I have that, if I have the $50,000 at my disposal, and it varies because it's going to depend on if the guy's been in the home or the family's been in the home for 3 years versus 10 years. If they've been in the home for 10 years and the equity's $50,000, that's probably a $120,000 home or something like that. But if they've been in the home for 3 years, it's a $400,000 home and the equity's already $50,000. Either way, I'm still getting a good deal. If that $400,000 home is the one I want, I'm giving them the $50,000, and now I'm 26 years, 27 years away from paying off. It does matter a couple of years, but the interest rate is so low is what I'm very attracted
to.
So.
I think I would be looking for the people that have bought their home 18 months ago to maybe 3 to 4 years ago when the rates were super low. If you could get in and assume somebody's loan at 2.75 or 3% or 3.25%, you're just going to be building principal in your home so much faster with that lower interest rate compared to going in and taking a 6.25% today. Keep it simple. If you're looking at a home and the seller of that home, if you can determine they bought their home in the last year and a half to 3-4 years ago, you may be able to afford to assume their current FHA or VA mortgage. Ask your realtor, ask whoever you're working with, ask the seller, is there a chance you have an assumable loan? I've got a pretty good size down payment, and I might be able to assume your current mortgage and give you a release of liability.
That is really interesting. That was a fantastic topic, and I'm glad that we covered that. You mentioned walking in here this morning, we're going to talk about that, and that is really interesting. And now I'm just going to hop on Zillow for fun, thinking, can I get this home even cheaper? That's so interesting.
You just might be able to afford. You know what's neat, Dave, is everybody agrees housing prices are pretty high right now because the market is still really good. Here's what you'd like as a buyer. Now I'm just getting a home that's nicer with more features for a lower payment and assuming somebody else's mortgage that's going to pay off faster with less in closing costs. There's a lot of benefits there.
I love that. I love that. You're listening to House Talk with Wally Kerr. Airs every Saturday morning right here at 7 a.m. on KOKC. And if you are thinking of making a move, you can call Wally at 405-330-3000. You can also text him at 330-3000. Visit wallyhasthebuyers.com. Simply get an estimated value for your home by texting your address to 330-3000 on a scale of 1 to 10. Does it have a pool in it? Have you remodeled? Maybe it's an 8 or a 9. If it's a nice home but no changes in the last 22 years, maybe
it's a 5 or a 6.
5 or a 6. Just be honest, and you'll get a fair
a market value assessment.
Market value assessment for that. You can hear replays of this show on Wally's YouTube channel. Listen to the podcast on all the podcast platforms, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, iHeartRadio, and many others. Previous episodes can also be found on the website wallytalkshouses.com, where we're already about 12 weeks in. There are some great topics we've covered in the last 2.5 months, so go to wallytalkshouses.com. And we want to mention this, Saturday, May 6th at 10 a.m., Wally's upcoming webinar.
Learn to grow wealthy by investing in real estate. We'll do that on a Zoom webinar They do need to register on the site there, Dave, WallyTalksHouses.com. Top of the screen, they can register. They'll get a 5-digit code to be invited to that Zoom webinar. We'll talk that day about how much money you need, potential investment properties, the advantages and disadvantages to owning real estate. Be about an hour long, and I'd love to have some of our listeners join if they're interested in investing.
Thank you for listening, and to reach Wally one more time, 330-3000. Thank you for listening to House Talk with Wally Kerr.